Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blockchain Basics. I am Christina Brujan, CEO of Continuum Market, and I am your host for today. We may or may not be joined by Anu Bardwaj. We may or may not have some QA, but I am encouraging everyone to put your notes here in the session chat so that if you do have anything that you'd like addressed during this session, that we can get it handled for you. So the speech I'm here to tell you today is an interpretation of a speech that I give a lot. I go through the circuit and give a speech called Blockchain for Brand Newbies, and our company Continuum Market, plus our partners Do Real Good. We host a get-together every Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific, and after the show, from 4 to 5, we have content in a show, and we introduce you guys to another aspect of blockchain. But after that show, we have roundtables where you can meet the blockchain brands and you can speak with me directly around blockchain for brand newbies. And that is really an open call for anyone who's trying to get into the space and just understand the baseline conversation. So you'll find a lot of those resources with Continuum. But here today, we are going to introduce you to the major concepts of blockchain. So for those of you taking notes at home, those major concepts are the history of blockchain, the structure of blockchain, or what I call the tech stack, the uses of blockchain. We'll discuss cryptocurrencies as a whole, and then all of the other types of blockchains. We'll touch on global mass adoption, and we'll also cover mining, which is a huge technical component of how blockchain works, and also touching on academic research and how it's changing with the new global economy. So a little bit about me. My name's Christina Brujan, and I am the CEO of Continuum Market. And before that, I co-founded a brand called CoinGenius. And we spent 3 years in the industry going around and gathering data to try to understand the correlations of the trading regimes. That sounds really fancy, but when you break it down, we were trying to find trends. And with big data, you can use really granular data and basically create color-coded sticky notes that can start to see when the blue ones start to move and when the purple ones start to move and when the green ones move the opposite way. And so through that, we started to get a lot of insights. And so other people in the industry looked to me for kind of the vetting process of, is a company going to do what they say they're going to do? And so we've turned that into Continuum Market, which is the Continuum Transparency Marketplace. And so you can find out all of the data points and all of the efforts that we're doing at Continuum to help explain this, not only to our Wall Street clients, of course, but all the way down to the little guy, or what we call the cousins, right? Because my cousins still don't even understand this. So I'm hoping to be able to share my screen, and it looks like I am able to do that. So bear with me just a moment here. Okay. So I'm going to show you guys some photos today. So the first photo I want to show you is this overview grid. Now this is a mind map, and this takes you through the 8 components of blockchain. We're just going to dive right into it so that you guys can hear what I'm saying. And if any of this starts to become overwhelming, just know at any point you can go Google these things and find out more. And we're aggregating all of that information on our website and working with our partners to organize it in a way that makes it really easy for my 8-year-old goddaughter to understand what blockchain is. And I believe it was Stephen Hawking. I'm going to attribute it to Stephen Hawking. It's a very strong principle for us at Continuum. If you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, you are probably not a subject matter expert. And with blockchain, everything is so complex that with the SEC legislation things going on, you almost have to explain it as a 5-year-old and have to take it down to that basic data tag level, which is what we've done with the first phase of our content. The second phase of our content is about what I'm going to show you here, which is what we call the 101 baseline. These are the things you need to reasonably understand in order to be kind of like have a working knowledge and be reasonably informed. Then the third tier of our content is focused around more of the PhD or subject matter expert. That's where our experts and our thought leaders dive really deep. They get very technical. Sometimes the implications are bigger than what you can wrap your mind around hearing it the first time. So we've kind of kept that available in our archives so you guys can go back and watch it and Google it and understand it. And that our efforts with blockchain legislation and SEC compliance start to kind of cross over to that more subject matter expert level. So with that, I'm going to take a quick sip of water and we're going to jump here into blockchain basics. All right, folks. So the first part that you need to understand about blockchain is the history. Essentially, it's been around for over 10 years now. It was a product of the 2008 American crash that basically stalled the global economy, and we realized that money is going to move differently. What the philosophers of blockchain proposed was that instead of having centralized data like banks storing the record, right, the ledger, the list, the proof that things happened, instead of having that be centralized, instead of having one bank have their set of data and another bank have their set of data, what if we flipped it inside out and we let everyone be their own bank? And that would require decentralized ledger technology. And that basically means the ledger can be checked no matter where you are by multiple people. Basically that it's an open, distributed ledger technology, right? Decentralized ledger technology means that it's not housed in one place, not one person has control over it. Essentially, the math of the system is what makes it work. So the history of that is the 2008 crash. Basically, this entity that we refer to as Satoshi Nakamoto released the Bitcoin blockchain. And that blockchain itself is not only the train tracks that the data runs on, but it's also the layer above it, the token that runs on the tracks. And so that token itself has a store of value. So when you think about Bitcoin, there's multiple layers to it. But basically with the financial collapse in banking and automotive, and you've seen these things happen in the dot-com bubble, these happen all the time. There's this fluctuation of, we think we know how the system works, oops, we were wrong. And usually it's the middle economy and the bottom billion type of folks that pay for it. We're trying to get beyond that and educate everyone so that we can start having these PhD and subject matter expert conversations with basically the fintech leaders of the future, because the models we've been teaching for 20, 30 years don't exist anymore. And that's a big part of what I do. I bring the data together so we can do those models. So basically you've got the financial collapse. Oh, everything's terrible. Look, enter Bitcoin. Here is this math based system that the way to think about blockchain, the easiest way I found to explain it is that there's two major components. There's the toddler, and then there's the executive table. The toddler example is basically if all data is a bunch of letters jumbled around, and by the time you decide this is this thing, this is this contract, this is me making this handshake, this is me saying I will pay $100, this is you saying I will receive your $100, when that thing happens, it becomes a block. And you can think of a toddler sitting next to a toy train track next to a set of wooden letter blocks, right? When that block happens and it's a real thing and the entities say, this is no longer just letters, it's an actual thing, the toddler essentially takes that block from the pile of blocks and moves it over onto the train. And then once it's on the train, it can't change, and it can't change what car on the train it's on. It will stay in that order as long as it's on the track, right? And so the process of going from this data happened to this data is official, that toddler part is kind of the mining component. We'll get to that in a second. Basically, the part of mining it and the part of the hash power to say that, yes, this actually happened and this is authorized, makes it kind of concrete. I liken it to, it's written in ink, not in pencil. You can't go back and change it. It's immutable, right? So there's that process. You guys can literally just think about it moving from this part over to this part. But once it's on this part, you can't change it. It's on the blockchain. So that's concept number one. Concept number two is what we call consensus algorithm. And that means that for all the nodes sitting at an executive table, if you have 10 seats in an executive table, for all those nodes, there's a system above it that kind of checks in with each one of those nodes and says, what did you get for item number 12? Oh, you got 20. What did you get for item number 12? Oh, you got 20. What did you get for item number 12? Oh, you got 20. What did you get for item number 12? Oh, you got 47. What did you get for item number 12? Oh, you got 20. What did you get for item number 12? Oh, you got 20. And because it is over 51%, they completely ignore even the bad data and they just return the value 20 to the user. And that is the principle of decentralized ledger technology. Understanding these components, we're going to go a lot faster now in the next part. So you've got the history of it. Banks crashed. Nobody really trusts the financial economy. The data models don't really make a whole lot of sense. And now we have blockchain. Basically, Pandora's box is open, and that means there's a lot of uses for this. I'm gonna move a bit faster with you guys. So we've kind of talked a little bit about the structure already. I think we've kind of covered the decentralization component. We've talked about the blocks, how the toddler moves it, and the openness of this. Again, I can't stress enough, centralized data, having one person in charge of that silo of data, having one entity like Google or Amazon being in charge of that, that's very scary for me. Blockchain is the opposite, where we are in charge of that and we license our data back to Google or back to Amazon, and we say, we tell you what you can and can't do with our data. So that's kind of the openness component. We'll have a bigger session on that when we get philosophical, and you guys can come join me every Friday and we'll talk about it. Number 3 is the uses. Blockchain works really well for anything that needs to be trusted. Anything that needs to say, yep, that happened. Anything that needs to have a stamp of approval on it. Anything that is a contract or an agreement between entities, whether that's a person-to-person in a rental agreement, or something much bigger, like you buying a house or you having executable contracts like pay for performance things. If this, then that happens, right? So anything that's really programmable and anything that is kind of ineffective right now, if you feel like it has 15 different layers of legacy infrastructure and you just want it to go from here to here, why can't it just do that? You probably want to come talk to me about blockchain. So enterprise is a huge component of this. If you're frustrated with your current enterprise infrastructure, blockchain technologies can probably help you. So there's a lot more than just that, because there's tokenized economies with blockchain. And basically that comes into the value of the token and the value for your behavior. You get rewarded for doing things. Again, if it can be programmed, then you can get reward from it. Right now, those big data companies I mentioned, they're worth all the money that they're worth because they deal in your data and you should be getting the money from that. It's a different topic. We'll get into that another day. But here, if we're going to look at the uses, I touched a bit on smart contracts. Financial services, again, are very ineffective. So payment gateways are a primary case for blockchain use cases right now. Video games is another component of it, a lot because of the tokenized reward. But what you do in a video game as you level up those skins, those things have value, and that's worth something on a secondary market. So that gets very interesting as well. Energy trading is one of my favorite things because we have to fix the data grid. We have to fix the energy grid. We have to fix all of these, climate change issues that affect all of us on this tiny little rock that we live on. Again, another reason I'm so excited about empowering women involved, because what we do in America affects everyone around the world. The energy trading, I've worked with a lot of folks that are doing amazing things, from waste management and turning landfills into energy, to gray water reclaiming, to vertical farming, to renewables, obviously, to stackable communities, to all of these things that actually the person that I speak the most about is my business partner, and he is over on like the civic service side of things, Jeremy Foreman with Do Real Good. And all of the things that we can do to really empower and better society as a whole, all around our planet, to me, comes down into energy trading and understanding that asset of energy. Blockchain is really good for anything with a supply chain to say, yep, it moved from here, it crossed this border, it got scanned in, it has been received, and then that information goes back to operations, and then the president goes, yay, okay, now I know what to expect for my next quarter earnings, right? Anything around supply chain is very important. Anti-counterfeiting, this is a huge one. This is something we call KYC AML, and that stands for Know Your Customer Anti-Money Laundering. And basically that is, you are who you say you are, your digital identity is a real thing, you carrying your phone around is a real thing that kind of reflects your digital identity. The anti-counterfeiting is even cooler because cash can technically be printed off the presses. And we've seen that this year with the stimulus, thanks $9 trillion into the economy, can be printed out of thin air, and counterfeiting can be printed out of thin air. With tokens, the math of the blockchain itself actually governs how often a token is released, how often it's mined, what those rewards look for. It's all in math. Like there's rules behind each of them, which is why Continuum is trying to like let you guys peek under the hood and see the rules and understand this is a purple rule and this is a green rule, and that means two different things, right? Healthcare, domain names for sure. Healthcare is a huge thing. So your data and your records and being able to prove something, you know, to your employer, or just trying to get all of your healthcare coordinated between providers. Obviously, it's a mess. Anything that's a mess can be handled with blockchain. So healthcare is really ripe, and we'll be doing some events on that later this year. Actually, I think next month in April, we're going to be doing those. I'm going to run out of time here, guys. So you see there's a lot of uses. These uses are for the blockchain technology, that decentralized ledger technology that says the handshake happened, that says something actually happened, and now we can all trust it, right? So from there, you get into cryptocurrencies. And cryptocurrencies are a small group of tokens that you can think of them as coins, right? So you'll hear me say coins and tokens almost interchangeably, but to me, a token does something. It has a governance token. It's a property token. A token does something. A coin just exists. It may or may not have a use case. It's probably a fork of something. And we look at all those data points too. So cryptocurrencies are really important to understand the factors of them. Yes, you can use them just like cash. You can pay people, and you can do remittance, and you can do accounts receivable and accounts payable, and there's crypto taxes and all of these resources that you'll find at continuum.market. It's a huge industry now. That's to use the cryptocurrencies. There's an entire industry that's just about trading these cryptocurrencies, which is where I got started 3 years ago. And basically, even the highest levels of Wall Street were asking us, what do we do? Do we just take the top 10 and trade them? And we're like, no, of course not. You wouldn't do that, because there's different kinds in the top 10. It's like an entire fruit basket. You've got apples and bananas and papayas and an avocado. And is that really a fruit? I don't know. It kind of behaves like a fruit. All of these kind of nuances, right? So you have to keep in mind that the tokens themselves, when you talk about Bitcoin, that is a property token. And you can go to our website and find out why it's property token. You also have stablecoins. And stablecoins are pegged to the dollar. They're not supposed to change in price. And that's a lot like, so you can like exchange your cash, right? So you can kind of predict the price of it, because volatility is a real pain when you're trying to figure out your cash flow. We'll talk about that in another session. You also have these smart contract coins, which is what Ethereum is. Ethereum is not a cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrencies are like cash. Ethereum is not like cash. Ethereum is a platform to run smart contracts. There's about 3,000 platforms built on top of Ethereum, which is why I'll talk about my feelings on the price movements later. DeFi coins are an entire ecosystem that you can think about DeFi in the same way that the banks have used your money for the last 100 years, meaning they take it, they put it in your account, they're like, thanks. They tell you that you have it, but really they're taking that money, moving it all over the place, making more money for them. And then they just make sure that they still have that $100 or so, that if you came in and took it, that they wouldn't have that operating capital anymore. DeFi does the same thing. It's basically staking, farming. These are verbs that we will explain to you guys what those are. It's basically making your money work for you the same way that banks have had money work for them. If you have the coin itself, you are printing the coin and you understand the ecosystem it's used in. You can lend it out to people who have liquidity or cash available. Think of it, cash is such an antiquated term. We'll talk about that too. Fiat is another term for cash. So you guys will hear me say fiat in between as well. DeFi coins is basically the banking industry explained for you. Almost all of the DeFi brands are like, let me tell you why mine's so great. They're all amazing. They're all really cool on technical level. And I'm vetting the ones that I can look at the tech stack and tell you exactly what these color-coded sticky notes are on there. Commodities tokenization has just gotten started, and I don't want to give away too much secret sauce from the Quandex data products, but basically we've already seen kind of having Bitcoin Gold and Bitcoin Diamond, and if you have a commodity behind the token, it's easier for people on Wall Street to go, okay, now it's worth something. It's backed by something. Well, there's that side of it, and then there's all of the commodities that move around in the traditional capital markets and the tokenization process of that. And the supply chain and the predictability and how things move around the world, and then the layer of how the money moves around the world, which I call the global economic engine. So we'll have more 102 level conversations around commodities tokenization, but trust me, it's a thing, and we have lots of data around it for the Quandex data products. Decentralized exchanges, I just want you guys to know that it exists, okay? Just know that there's this thing called decentralized exchanges, and we'll talk about it another day. So that's it for cryptocurrencies. As you can see, it's a whole fruit basket, right? It's not just apples to apples, and there's a lot of layers and a lot of data tags, which is why everyone gets color-coded sticky notes for Christmas. All right, so moving on, we're going to talk about digital identity interoperability. This is the handshake that's possible in the Jetsons future that I imagine in the next 10 years. But we have to actually build the infrastructure, and we have to build the legislation around what is important to us during commerce as a human being. What do we want to protect our kids from? What do we want entrepreneurs to be able to do? What should the safe harbors look like? Most of that for me comes down to digital identity interoperability. And that means that I am who I say I am, and I want what I say I want, and I sign off on it. And if I sign off on it, then I'm the same person when I'm on this blockchain as when I'm on this blockchain. I'm the same person when I walk into Chase Bank as when I walk into Wells Fargo. And we kind of just extend that in the digital ecosystems and what we call interoperability. Interoperability is a really fancy way for us to say, hey, we see that you have that badge that lets you in. Okay, come on over. That's really what it is. It's a handshake that says, yep, I see you, you're authorized, come on over. So from that, basically, this is where we get in the conversation of side chains. And you can think of it as those train tracks with the toddler. It's like a ton of train tracks running around, and where trains can hop between train tracks, and where there's way stations, and that, you know, it becomes interoperable. So that is a really huge piece of this, but that's almost like the next step. But you have to understand that's where we're going. The reason we're going there is for number 6, global mass adoption. These opportunities are huge. And not only are they huge in countries like America, but they're really, really applicable for countries that have never had a baseline for technology, meaning they could leapfrog from having no technology to having smartphones, from having no income and no wealth management to having a bank in their pocket. They don't have Wi-Fi where they're at, they're walkable to it. We have mobile Wi-Fi stations like deploying across all over the world to make this accessible. We're working with partners for crypto ATMs to turn those ATMs into a kiosk station so that no matter where you're at, you can get access to your money. This is about putting this back in your hands and having the power over really everything in your life. I mean, once you really wrap your mind around it, well, I'll tell you a little bit about my story. So I worked for 15 years in Fortune 500 in big data, in innovation, doing things like geofencing, means when you cross a place, it triggers something, and it's really fancy, right? When I realized what blockchain was and I realized what decentralized ledger technology was, I pretty much felt like my brain fell out of my head onto the ground. I had to pick it up, dust it off, and try and put it back in. Like, it was that big. And so I hope to teach everyone, including my cousins, including the highest echelons of Wall Street, why global mass adoption is so important. To me, it allows everyone to have a voice. To me, it allows everyone to vote with their dollars. To me, it allows everyone's dollars to work for them. So it's part of why I get so excited about this. Global mass adoption is going to come in many, many flavors with many different data tags, and Continuum will be there to kind of push this along and say, hey, we see this. Do you guys see the same thing? And then have that reflected in our dashboards. All right, so moving on to mining. I'm actually going to put mining in its entire different category. This is kind of a table session in and of itself, which is why we have Head of Mining Intelligence, Dustin Minch, who joins us at least once a month on our Friday meetups, and he is available for the quarterly expos. I can also get you guys in contact with them anytime you need to. So if you need mining expertise, we aggregate those resources together as well. Okay, mining's super important for the same reason that I explained the toddler situation before. You have to make the act of mining, and most of that comes to energy consumption. There's different tiers that you can mine on. You can use an old laptop. You can use an old cell phone. You can use Raspberry Pi boards. You can do a lot, but most of the mining conversation that you hear in the mainstream news comes from what the bigger players. So CPUs is kind of tier, like the lower tier. GPUs is your middle tier, and ASICs is your highest tier, and they all consume different levels. Basically, ASICs consume the most, GPUs consume the next most, and CPUs consume the next most. And there's different blockchains that are hashed differently. The term is a hash rate. And so there's different equipment that's applicable for different blockchains, but mostly you hear about people mining things and then converting it to BTC or ETH. BTC is Bitcoin, ETH is Ethereum. The mining component is huge and very nuanced and complex and very critical to how I evaluate the tech stack, especially if there is voting rights or governance rights from the community. I consider that part of the mining components here. Okay, so the next part here is academic research. Sorry to skip over mining. Obviously, there's so much we can talk about, but come join us. We will talk about mining. What you need to know, mining is really important. You can make money with it if you are obsessed with mining. Otherwise, let the mining people handle the mining stuff because there's a lot going on in there. The other part here, number 8, is the part that I get really excited about because I'm not a miner. I'm never going to be a miner. Those things sound like you have a train in your living room. I'm more interested in the academic research. I'm more interested in how do we change this narrative? How do we get more people involved, all the way from young girls coming into STEM or STEAM activities? How do we get this blockchain 101 narrative kind of baselined so that everyone can have this conversation with me and kind of keep up at the table, understand the basic concepts so that their opinion can be shared and we can all kind of speak blockchain 101. So for academic research, we are working with collaboration with colleges, with civic groups. We are doing a ton of stuff with, as I mentioned, with the kind of bleeding edge of fintech education and revolution and data forecasting. We're also putting together workshops, and we have a ton of sister events that bring all of this together. So it's not just the Continuum events that you guys can be a part of, but also the other events that I have been to over 150 conferences in the last 3 years before COVID. I know the good ones, and I know the people in the industry who are truly trying to move the thought leadership forward. And so you'll see those tagged accordingly in the system. For the record, anyone who wants to submit their brand or their event or their blockchain related brain to Continuum Marketplace to be in the transparency marketplace, all you have to do is go to the website and actually complete the Continuum brand application. So that is the best place to start to kind of get into the academic research funnel. Academic research very much follows our R&D path and our taxonomy path, the definition language that we do for blockchain, and very much the pieces that resonate the most from our Quandex quadrant data dashboards. So academic research is a huge piece for me. I basically think if we can peer review all of these brands and we can have the very intelligent thought leaders who are part of the blockchain ecosystem speak with very intelligent thought leaders who are not part of the blockchain ecosystem, start to build that bridge between the two, I truly feel that that will help govern the blockchain legislation conversations. And we're in a weird time right now, especially in America, for legislation. We're going to have to make legislation that's good for the majority of Americans faster than we ever have before. So I'm rather looking forward to it. I feel like I need to gather all of the data points, and so that's a lot of what we have done with Continuum. So that being said, I'm going to take you guys through, ooh, fancy pants. I'm going to take you guys through our deck really quick. This is a super high overview, just so if you want to learn more about this, if you're halfway around the world and you're like, what does that have to do with me? I'm like, here's 87 data points as to why this is important. So you guys are always welcome, especially if you've met me through the Sheconomy conference, if you met me through this event, Amplifying Her Voice, this International Women's Conference that's put on by Sheconomy. Just drop that name and let me know, because I want to work with you. I want why this is so important, especially people around the world that I've never met before. I encourage us to open the conversation. So a little bit about Continuum Transparency Marketplace. As I mentioned, we started as a data company. So a lot of this is driven by the new economy. Basically, the indexes of the new economy will be different than the indexes that we currently look at today. And we're already seeing that in our forecast models. The crypto market behavior is secondary. It's really about the underlying asset. And our mission for Continuum is to basically separate this out, make it easy for everyone to understand, and provide clean data products to the quants and data scientists and regulatory bodies. There's many brands in the space that are doing this as well. We are championing them also. We do have a plan to monetize on our crypto market insights. We've been trading for 3 years, and we're excited to share the results of all of that with you guys, because all of this is to prove that we can quantify the new global economic engine. We've been having these conversations with Wall Street for 3 years. Now it's time to actually teach my cousins and the 101 community what all of these terms mean and why all of the things on this page are important to understanding the global economic engine. Just for a really quick moment, if you look at the bottom corner of tools, that's the part I get the most excited about. That's our computer vision, our 3D interactive visualizations, the charts and overlays, the sentiment visualizations. Basically, this is what we call data visualization. It's my favorite part of what we do at Continuum Market. Okay, so you guys may or may not know, but cryptocurrency has evolved in a sentiment standpoint from the last few years. So when I first came into it, lots of people thought it was fake. Lots of people thought, oh, there's all this negative sentiment. Those are scams. Now we're 3 years later. Now we're starting to see, oh, there's actual use cases for it. Oh, these very big companies are starting to understand the fundamentals of limited supply. These very big companies that are moving money on behalf of other people, that are moving money on behalf of the little guy almost. That is a huge trigger in comparison to, just the small amount of enthusiasts. When you start seeing things like MicroStrategy and Grayscale coming in, you start seeing people like Elon Musk commenting on this. You start seeing Mark Cuban moving in for NFTs. What are NFTs? I'll tell you all about it. These are big signals, what we call event triggers in the sentiment landscape. And so we can see that this landscape is very different than what the landscape was even a year ago. You add on the $9 trillion printed from USD in 2020 and the Fed inflation policies, 14 years of quantitative easing. From the documents that we can see and just how we understand markets to move, we're very, very concerned about an imminent recession happening that will ricochet across the globe. These ripples will be felt by everyone. And so we want everyone to understand this new, very small economy over in cryptocurrencies, because compared to traditional capital markets, it's still very, very small. But it is a path out of this Jenga block of finance that we've created around ourselves. Okay, so the Continuum strategy basically is, in 4 little summaries here, all of the things I've been talking about. The insights of the dashboards and analytics, essentially what I call automating Christina's brain so that you guys can see what I can see. The event triggers, as we talked about, you guys will see those in our news feeds. We've got a Discord. We keep all of this open communication because all of this comes into our trading strategy, other people's trading strategy. We've got lots of Discord and Telegram groups around trading strategy if you guys want to get involved. This is about taking responsibility for your money. This is about educating yourself. This is not about handing your money to someone else and hoping with your fingers crossed that you're going to get a return on it. That is not what we're doing. We're doing it so you can be in the driver's seat. And that requires a fair amount of education. Good news, I have a partner, Do Real Good, and Jeremy Foreman, who has the exact step-by-step guide of how you get from K through 12 level certifications, 13th grade and beyond, all the way up to the PhD. We're taking the blockchain sectors as a small little piece of it, because he's actually conquering this for every sector. He started in public service, which crosses everything on the planet, and kind of worked his way backwards on his data there. Getting off track. Our trading strategy is important to us. We also understand that next, in the Jetsons future that I've kind of talked about, that multi-exchange tech and that interoperability is to be a huge component of being able to move this forward in, an agnostically operating new global economic engine where everyone has opportunity. So part of what I've spoken with Anu about the outcomes of this Amplifying Her Voice Economy Summit is that there's going to be a lot more women entrepreneurs that need to be taken into the new data models. And how do we track that? How do we get engagement? Because that changes the new global economic engine. So all of this kind of is obviously very fascinating to me, but it really tends to weave between these four, which is all the way from the insights that I see right now. What does the landscape look like right now? What happens on the if this, then that type of things for the event triggers? What does that mean for where I want to place my money in the roulette table of cryptocurrency trading? And what does that mean for opportunities for other people to learn from what we're learning and automate some of these, maybe through AI, maybe through multi-exchange tech, or maybe through a token strategy? So all of the last part of it is how do we pay it forward and give it out to the community? Okay, so you guys have heard me talk a lot about this. This is one of my favorite slides of Continuum. Basically, it shows you the layers of what you have to look at for every asset. And there's over 12,000 of them now. That was the last number. It might be higher than that now. The interesting part, most of those are a fork of something else. And a fork means either, it diverged and it's still kind of supported, or it may have, there's different kind of forks. There's actually all kinds of cutlery, and I'll explain that to you guys. But bottom line is the underlying use case, what it is at its most basic component, is what governs everything for it in our ecosystems, right? So if it's if it's Bitcoin, that is its own thing versus Bitcoin Cash, which is a fork of Bitcoin, versus Doge, which we're not going to get into. Okay, we'll take the notorious SEC bad boy Ripple. So Ripple was created on its own blockchain. And because it's its own blockchain, because it's its own token, and because it is what I consider an interoperability token, its use case is fundamentally different than, say, Ethereum, which is a smart contract. I can tell I'm already confusing you guys. Basically, there's 5 layers. There's the core use case, and I will color code this for everyone, I promise. Then there is the asset. So like, what is it used for in its own marketplace? How does it move in its own marketplace? What are the details behind it and the data points behind its own marketplace behavior? Then you look at the asset type, because if it's a smart contract asset type, you expect certain things from it than you would if it was, say, a stablecoin. Then you look at its behavior. Is it volatile? Does it respond to sentiment? What does it do in the ecosystem? Not its internal ecosystem, but the trading market ecosystem, the secondary behavior. Then you have to take into account what the landscape is right now and where the sentiment is going. You also have to take into account where the adoption is right now and where the adoption is going. If they're making big partnership announcements, that to me is a sentiment trigger that goes all the way back to the core of, is the price of this thing actually going to increase? So I kind of work my way backwards, but you guys are welcome to give me a call and ask any questions and come stop by to Continuum and do real good events for the networking, and happy to really dig deep in here. In the consumer adoption, just to hurt your guys' brains just a tiny little bit, this is just scratching the surface here, but we've already seen ricochets in the ecosystems for payment gateways, cross-border payments, which changes everything if you're in the military and have ever had to go across a border and then dealt with the payment structure. And then what do you do with your taxes on that if you're sending money home? Holy moly. All right, from the top, payment gateways, cross-border payments, tokenized reward economies, which is huge, wealth management and building wealth and holding on to wealth and responsibility for your wealth management, global supply chains, renewables and emerging markets, things that haven't even existed yet, things that will exist in the Jetsons future, yield economies, which is part of that mining and staking and farming, and equitable opportunities for all economic classes. We can now transcend geolocation, and I can almost reach into your living room halfway around the world to get this information to you. Now that this is available, we want to make sure that everyone is aware of these opportunities. Everyone all over the world, including my grandmother, including my cousins. I want everyone to understand what these things are and how they're already changing your life. You just don't know yet. Okay, moving on. I'm going to go really fast through here. This is probably my favorite slide, but this is more for the Wall Street folks. So for the Wall Street folks, we're tracking roughly 50 different cryptocurrencies, and technically not everything is a cryptocurrency. Like, we need a better term for it. So we call them digital assets, but most of the world still refers to them as cryptocurrencies. Only some of them are actually cryptocurrencies. But we're tracking 50 of them. And those 50 of them have obviously their own set of data points. But then when you overlay that on the traditional capital markets, like money moving around the world, opens and closes, futures, open interest, Fed rates, you can start to see where the narrative is changing, and you can start to see market regimes emerging. So that's 1 and 2. Then we overlay it with the precious metals and the commodities correlations that our market analysis team has been doing with Wall Street and CME for 23 years. So taking the precious metals, which behave differently than what we call edible versus non-edible commodities, so how food moves around the world, plus the energy commodities, which is a big sector of interest for me. All of that goes into the ecosystem, kind of gets hit with a blender. We pour it through our data science intelligence engine, and then it comes out in pretty colors that shows us what those correlations actually look like. And I don't think I included that slide in here, but you guys can see it on our website. That is under our work. And the first 2 components there, you can kind of take a look at what we're doing on the data science side. And that's only what's public right now. There's a lot more coming in the next 60 to 90 days. So here for the data components, as I mentioned, you've got your traditional metrics. Now, this might be a little over some of your guys' heads, but it's important you know this. In the money world of fintech and Wall Street, there is this thing they call quants, and that's quantitative analysis. And the quants are basically the math wizards that sit behind the computer and tell the models, the data, what they think is happening. And what we're doing is we're taking that quant world plus a real human trader strategy and putting those together. It's called collective intelligence. In order to do collective intelligence, we have to have all of the traditional metrics that you would normally see in a quant shop. But basically, we call it the quant toolbox. That's your SMA, EMA, DMI. That's your simple moving average, estimated moving average, daily moving average. The Greeks are really important. That's like your beta, your Black-Scholes, the martingale theory. It gets really complicated, but you have to have all of that in order for our stuff to work. So if you're going to get involved, it's important to know we have to have the data all the way to that level. There's a reason for it, and we're happy to teach you why. The next part is taking the data that's all at that level, at that very granular level. And then we start doing some time series forecasting. And that is kind of our secret sauce of our Satoshi calculations of how do these things move together and what can we infer from the current status. That's basically what you see in our Quandex products, our dashboards, our analysis, and is reflected in our public reports. All of that goes into trying to understand the regimes of the market behavior. We look at technical analysis, and basically that's like finding the ranges, and then understanding if something, is moving in momentum either positively or negatively. And then what could change its momentum, what could change its trajectory, essentially. And most of that comes down to sentiment. So number 4 is sentiment, and that is looking at, are they getting good adoption? Are they getting named in a lawsuit? Do they have regulation challenges? Do you see influencers doing pump and dumps, which is shilling, which is a bad thing? And you see it reflected in the market. What's the word I'm looking for? Liquidity issues. Pump and dumps almost always result in a negative liquidity issue. Credible traders, the ones that you should follow and that do have really good insights, definitely the ones that I follow. The retail aspect of it. So institutional is like the big names, the big Wall Street folks, the MicroStrategy, the Grayscales, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, all of those are institutional, right? Retail is like the average day trader. They're moving around money, but they're in charge of it. It's not like a company behind it, right? So retail is referred to, kind of a single entity, although you'll have some family offices and things like that. Although family offices are usually institutional. But basically retail is a factor. If retail really loves it, like we saw with Doge for the last 3 years, even before Elon got involved, that to me is a huge signal. Like they're using it all the time. You can see it trading multiple times a day. The data speaks for itself. We also find that customer service is a very big factor, especially as we're talking to some of these exchange brands where they have a glitch in the system or they get hacked or something terrible happens. They need to have a customer service baseline. And we've found that the majority of the cousins and Wall Street has a higher threshold for dabbling in some of these companies if they know they have someone they can call if something goes wrong. So customer service is a huge factor for us, which is why we've created the 24/7 customer service channels for all of the Continuum Transparency Marketplace brands. Every brand in Continuum Market you can get a hold of 24/7 through us. We also, of course, look at their development, their product announcements. What is their GitHub doing? Are they making traction? Are they doing what they said that they were going to do? And of course, the marketing, which is what did they say they were going to do? What did they say publicly? And did they stick to it? Did they launch on the day that they said they would? All of those are event triggers and usually come down to sentiment. So I'll tell you a little bit around the transparency platform. We are highly focused on baselining the blockchain legislation component of this. In data science, we call it taxonomy. In legislation, they call it definition language. My cousins call it keywords, like what you would search for. All of that comes down to baselining so that everyone can speak blockchain. That's our number one initiative. Our number two initiative is to have all the data organized so I can run time series forecasting on it. And that requires knowing all the data in the ecosystem. So in Q1, we've been focusing very heavily on the event calendar, which is our opportunity to talk to all levels of blockchain consumers. So whether you're just getting started or you're a veteran or I've met you 800 times, we want you to come to the events. We want you to come to the sister events because those are where the thought leaders are. Those are the people, I've probably got over 300 of them that you're like, oh, I wish I could have lunch with John Nigerian. Give me a call, right? Like there's a lot of folks in that list. So event calendar is where you can meet those. We have public social campaigns to kind of help funnel our brands towards all of that. Almost everything runs around event calendar. So you can think of time is one of the constants, and geolocation or space. So the time-space continuum is what we talk about a lot. Time keeps ticking on and where you are physically matters. So all of that gets handled in event calendar. And we use that as our sentiment triggers for our intelligence engine. Q2 is going to be about turning all this data on for everyone. So taking all of these amazing data partners that I've been working with for 3 years and saying, if we find it valuable, you guys might find it valuable as well. And so turning that on to kind of letting other folks start to play with this data is something I'm really hoping to get out the door before 6:30. So before the end of Q2, before our Q2 Continuum Quarterly Expo, I'm hoping we will be making that announcement before that. So Data Playground is coming. We also are obviously cooking up some very cool things with dashboards and analytics. That takes a little longer to bake, so you guys are going to see that in Q3. And then in Q4, as I said, we're going to be turning this over more about promoting our brands like within the ecosystem, so the consumer products from the blockchain ecosystem and enhancements based on direct consumer feedback from those 24/7 customer service channels. So I'm rather excited to bring this to life with everyone. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I believe I've probably gone way over on time here. But so excited to meet with everyone. So excited to have these conversations. You guys can always get a hold of me. I have a team standing by here at the event. so that you can reach out to Continuum Market. We hope to see you guys on Friday. We're going to be doing this is going to be Civic Engagement Week because we've got AmeriCorps this week, and you can talk to Jeremy Foreman, my business partner. He's got all the details for you. He's running around this event here somewhere. So really looking forward to chatting with everyone. Please reach out to me. And also, if you could, follow, like, and subscribe. We're at Twitter at Continuum3000, LinkedIn at Continuum3000, and you can reach me directly, Christina Brujan, at Girl Genius XV. But seriously, I hear everything that comes in through Continuum. So with that being said, thanks everybody. And oh good, I'm getting more phone calls. Thanks everyone. Have a great conference.